Hi everybody, so today I want to talk about how minor keys actually work. I think there's a bit of confusion about this from guitarists because it's not something we tend to necessarily grow up with culturally. And I do think a lot of the basic information given about how to approach things like minor 2-5-1s and so on in jazz YouTube can be a little bit overcomplicated and not necessarily that helpful. So if you stay to the end of this video, hopefully you'll have a suite of things you can do on minor 2-5-1s that will sound stylistic and start to bring you more into the bebop world. Hello, welcome to Jazz Guitar Scrapbook. Now, guitarists I think have a slightly different kind of upbringing from a lot of other musicians because unlike people like, pianists or musicians who play the piano, we don't spend a lot of our lives on the whole playing classical music. Because your typical sort of minor rock progressions are what we call mostly modal. Not always, but most of them, especially in the past 50 years or so, tend to be modal. So they belong to one minor scale, usually the Aeolian or Dorian, occasionally things like harmonic minor, but usually those scales with a flat 7. So you can think of things like, like Stairway to Heaven and so on, where we're using the natural minor or Aeolian mode to actually cover the whole chord progression. Now, this isn't quite how jazz works. And one reason why jazz doesn't work like this is because it's a little bit closer to classical music, certainly for like standards and things, in how it deals with the minor key. So for instance, in a minor 2-5-1, where I'm building a chord on 2, and then 5 of the key, and then 1, I will have this chord with a major third in it. This is in this case we're in the key of A minor. This is an E7, so it's got a major third, G sharp. Now G sharp isn't something that appears in the A natural minor scale as used by Jimmy Page, etc, etc. It's something we find within another scale called the harmonic minor. So that can be confusing. You think, oh, how can there be 3 different or whatever minor scales in one? Well, we're only really thinking about that note. That note is a note that desperately wants to go back to A, right? That's its function. It's called the leading tone for that reason. Now in jazz, sometimes we just don't do that because we're subversive like that. We go, no, I'm not that's staying there. There's nothing you can do about it. But quite a lot of the time, we do actually resolve it. Either way, you've got to know where it is. So this is my suggestion. Let's take an A minor pentatonic scale and let's get used to adding that note in, the G sharp. It's a semitone below A or a fret below A. Oh, now this scale I call the Lee Morgan scale because he uses it in his solo one, Moanin', with Art Blakey and the Jazz Messages. And it's great, so you can play the blues. And it can really just get that little push back into A minor. So it works brilliant on a minor 2-5-1. Like that, right? You could use it on a minor turnaround, like Softly, as in the Morning Sunrise. This is C minor. All the chords fit the minor pentatonic, more or less, apart from this one, which has got the B in it, so we'll do the same trick again. And already we've got some jazz coming into it, I think, just with that one note. By the way, it's not important for all of the chords to be fit by the scale. You can just play the minor pentatonic over that anyway. If you look at the melody for Blue Bossa, for instance, you actually have it's in the same key, C minor, but you actually have the B flat, the flat 7 clashing against the G7 chord, and that gives you the famous Hendrix chord, the 7th sharp 9, which we all know and love. So that's absolutely fine, you can do that. But if you want to give it that little push, then you can use the natural 7, and I'd highly recommend it. I want to talk a little bit about the traditional way people handle 2-5-1s. So a lot of the time on YouTube and in books you might see something like this. Okay, so we've got 3 chords and we need to fit a separate scale to each chord. And that can sound really hip. For instance, you know, this melodic minor mode thing. Yeah, it's the sort of thing Bill Evans would do, right? It's lovely. But it's not the main thing that people do. If you go back and look at people like Grant Green, Kenny Burrell, Charlie Parker, Lester Young, blah, 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 all those sorts of people. In general, we are going to divide the minor key into 2 sections. So we're going to start with an A minor, just the notes of the A minor triad. Right? So that's kind of the inside bit, right? That's kind of the home base, if you like. And then we've got the sort of outside or kind of tension bit, which is, in this case, it's a diminished chord, diminished 7th chord, a half step below A minor. So in this case, G sharp diminished. And this has the notes the 7, it's got the 2nd, the 4th, and the flat 6, which is the tensest note in the minor key. The Twin Peaks note, as I call it. And that really creates a strong sense of movement and resolution back into the key. And it's very classical as well. But if you listen to something like Lester Young's Tickle Toe, he uses that technique, right? It's a very old school sound, so I definitely play around with that. Now if you want to make it sound a little bit more jazz, you can add in the major 6th to that minor chord to make it into an A minor 6th chord. Which sounds a little bit more exotic. It's called the Barry Harris minor 6th diminished scale, and there's videos and videos about that by all sorts of people. But that's one way of doing it, right? If you look at people like Grant Green, you'll often find him doing things like this. Right? And in this case, what I'm doing is I'm taking not all the notes diminished, just 3 of them. It's quite nice to skip out notes sometimes. It makes it less predictable. And I'm just kind of doing a little surround, semitone on each side of that first note. And I'm going down the scale, which you can do by ear, and then a semitone below, and then the 2 notes of the A minor. So there's a whole bunch of lines that you can play based on that logic. Now there's a Barry Harris way to look at that, which I've talked a lot about in videos, which is that we can actually think about this section, the E7 section of that, as, you know, running down a G7 scale to the 3rd of the E7, and then back to the A minor again. And that's beautiful because you can add in added notes, and do all the bebop stuff. But I wouldn't necessarily bother going too far in that direction first until you've learned where that G sharp note is, that all-important 3rd of the E7. And sometimes it's better than just trying to remember all of the melodic minor modes, whatever they might be, over a 2-5-1. Not that those can't sound awesome as well. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'll catch you on the next one.